Thank you very much, Arvind. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for asking me again. This is the third time that you've asked me here. I must congratulate you and the IDSA on your sustained Kautilya initiative and on what you've achieved. It's really gained strength over the last 3 years, as I can see, both in prompting scholars in India to undertake research on Kautilya, on the Arthashastra, and also in putting together a community internationally as well, and to putting us in touch with scholars who research these subjects across the world. What you've achieved is really important, and you spoke of the relevance of the Arthashastra today. Now, to a practitioner like me, there's really two aspects which strike me as being particularly relevant. In the first place, Kautilya offers distilled experiences of living and operating in a multi-state system which long predates and is an alternative to the Westphalian state system, of which, in any case, historically speaking, we have a rather limited experience in the last few centuries. In fact, in many ways, Kautilya is much more relevant to what we face today. Certainly, in at least one respect, the Westphalian system is based on an idealized sovereignty, which is immaculate. I mean, it's in every respect. The Magadhan, or the Indian state system that Kautilya actually worked in and operated, was not. And the same thing is actually happening today. When you look at what technology has done to the state, its borders are porous. By placing power in the hands of individuals and small groups, technology has broken the monopoly of violence that the state used to claim, that the Westphalian state claims still. So in these respects, the modern state is probably closer to what Kautilya describes than to that Westphalian ideal. And it's therefore relevant and useful to a practitioner to see how the Arthashastra deals with these issues. Because we are in a world where power is much more evenly distributed than it was even, say, during the Cold War. A world tending towards multipolarity, like the one that Kautilya knew, within which he worked to maximize the power of his king, his state. So it seems to me it would be interesting to work actually on the intersection of political science and modern history, where to see the Kautilyan approach to coping with a multipolar world. Because there really aren't that many examples when you look back in history to that experience. And Kautilya, that in some ways is what marks Kautilya out from the others that we read, the other classical texts that we read. The other aspect that I find fascinating on rereading Kautilya is his reminder of the higher purposes of the state. Now, I know this is not what the general impression is. The general impression is of Kautilya's Machiavellian, is the word that we keep seeing everywhere. And yet, this is not a text for the glorification of the state or the prince. It constantly reminds us that the dharma of the king is to benefit his subjects and his state, not himself. And the choice of policy instruments, whether samadama, dandaveda, all depends on which serves that higher purpose, and not on the individual preference or the whim of the king. This is not a text on the divine right of kings or the mandate of heaven. Its basis is quite different. Instead, it's a text on how to achieve noble goals in an ignoble world, to achieve political and social progress in an unstable and unpredictable environment. Here again, Kautilya is remarkably modern and has contemporary resonance. And the fact that he managed to establish the modern empire shows that he has efficacy as well. In fact, if you look at it, the dilemma of the modern state is how to reconcile its two faces. One face is the poetic or the political imagination of nationalism that inspires its people to believe in it and to actually die for it. The other face is the prosaic one, the bureaucratic rationality, from which people expect good governance, the delivery of services. I mean, what I think McIntyre, somebody called the telephone company face of the modern state. for which nobody will lay down his life, for that telephone company face. In other words, there is in modern statecraft an opposition, a binary opposition between dharma and artha, between norm and purpose, between aspiration and instrumentality. And studying Kautilya and modern history shows us that this binary is not just a modern phenomenon. Thanks to what you all have done in the last 3 years and those of several scholars around the world, we may be at another Kautilyan moment. The last was when the national movement needed the Arthashastra in order to find reassurance of Indian statecraft, certainly in the first half of the 20th century. And they wanted to establish that we had an independent realist tradition of our own, and Arthashastra was very useful. The Arthashastra itself emerged from a collision between the 6th century BC Enlightenment, Buddhism, rationalism, the Upanishads, and the power politics of the Magadhan or the Indian state system at that time in subsequent centuries. Both were worlds in rapid change, and we seem to be at an analogous historical moment again. So let me once again wish you well. Hope that this series of conferences on the Arthashastra and Kautilya organized by the IDSA goes from strength to strength. Thank you. Thank you.